thought tonight might be a good time to read, what the journey was here. So I get a lot of people that come on the channel and they go, they look and they say, oh, it's a white woman sitting there. What can she know? What has she experienced? And they start haranguing. You don't know anything about Hinduism. You don't know this. You don't know that. Well, I'm going to read what the life was here. Okay? What was the life path here? What was experienced? Where did I start out? What was the journey? Okay? So I want to put this out there because people think it's like you get up and you read a book. Okay, maybe you've gone to an ashram and you were there for a couple of weeks and all of a sudden you think you know something. Well, that's not what a journey entails. Okay? So I'm going to read this 30 years and many miles. What did it take? What was my journey from start to completion? Okay? From infancy to India, 30 years and many miles. In my youth, there was an inner longing and an outer searching from an early age. There was a driving urge to know God and to know truth. Other than that, the early years were unremarkable. From my young years, though, there was a pull to religious materials and an inner feeling. At youngest was a great affinity with St. Francis of Assisi, and I was very close to animals. There was also some carryovers from other lifetimes that were a bit unusual, but nothing greatly remarkable. During high school years, I would on occasion drop into a church where the Christ on the cross would appear to move. There was much prayer. After high school, I went into an esoteric Christian order and there received Shaktipat. A gold bolt of light went through my body, and at that point auras were seen and other phenomena occurred. I learned valuable lessons there on prayer and manifesting, and I stayed until there was a movement within to go. Now, when this took place, that light, I can tell you, it was like this. I can tell you even the dimension of it. It was like from there to there, and went straight through the body and nailed me on the floor. And I was there like this, like being crucified on a cross. I was there. When that hit, it hit. No joke. Okay? Nothing that you can, this is not something you look for. Okay? I spent some time in the military, a very brief happening, and from there gravitated to the Hare Krishna movement for some time and learned bhakti. Was able to meet and have some talks with Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta at that time. When Spirit prompted, then I left there and spent some years in quiet searching and prayer and introspection. Learned much from nature, read the Bible, and prayed always for wisdom and truth. The Bible revealed some very interesting things. Was still moving in the path of bhakti and devotion, and started going through the dark night of the soul, which lasted for years. Now, when I said I read the Bible, I mean I read it from cover to cover and prayed about it, surrendered into it. looking for answers, wanting to know God, wanting to know truth above all things. Okay? I was not out partying. I was not out drinking at the nightclubs. Okay? I was out searching for truth. The kundalini became prevalent, and there was quite challenging from the age of 28 to 50 years of age. During the kundalini time, cities came up. The compassionate heart opened and healing abilities came. But it was so intense that in the end this one stopped doing any healing modalities. The internal lights kept rotating and the external blue pearl continued to be seen. While living in San Francisco and sitting down to a glass of latte at Cafe Trieste, I can even tell you what seat was sitting in at that time. The mind for the first time just dropped into silence. From that point, writings would begin to appear across the screen of consciousness. Then was pulled once again into the Buddhist experience. From there, it just continued. I was one of the first people in the U.S. to be indoctrinated into the karma. It was an unusual happening. Okay. But anyway, let's continue on. Through all of this was the continued prayer and yearning to know the truth absolutely. Since the age of 18, while in the esoteric Christian order, the practice of using the Om as mantra continued on through the years. Various external practices came and went, fluid. Eventually was drawn to India, where the last of the conditionings were broken through and a nirvikalpa samadhi was entered, and a sahaj nirvikalpa samadhi remained and remains to date. This nirvikalpa, when entered after passing through the final great fear of the death of the self-identity, which shatters all previously held beliefs as to who and what God is, and also shatters the identification that one has with the identity that was known as Sharon. What remains is an identity minus the bondages, an identity where there is only the source which has no personal sense. And that personality and form are simply byproducts of being. After that experience of directly entering and dissolving into the universal self, this one wrote to the one that was my guru, in breaking through the conditionings, it was advised that the Ashtavakra Gita be read as my words were then a mirror thereof. Having no idea what the Ashtavakra Gita was, this one then bought a copy, and it was like reading a diary of the experience of Brahman or self. This solidified, as much as anything can solidify emptiness, the experience which is ongoing to date. Which I have to change and say it's not an experience because it's a shift of consciousness. It becomes the reality. Since that time, this one has been speaking of this consciousness, knowing that all bondage is held in place by simply misdirected mind, taking the body and form to be the reality, and not knowing the spirit which is eternally pure and unchanging. So this has been my path. Most of the search was internalized. External rituals were internalized, and the movements were ever heading in the direction of silence and peace beyond mind. So that's a real quick overview of it. So now I'm going to read to this, and it gets a little bit more into depth as to what is the journey, what one goes through, what one experiences. Shaktipat to Samadhi. There have been many along the way, each progressing me towards center, each taking me closer to the core of being, many coming from the mind into consciousness, and last taking me from the individualization of ego ideation into the implosion, which leaves the awareness of the great impersonal core of being, that purity called abstract intelligence, or the formless constant, what I like to call it, the formless constant, or source, or Brahman. The last was not an experience per se, as experience is of mind and form. The last takes you beyond mind and thought into that great pregnant void beyond I am, which is at the heart and center from which all creation stems. So which experience would you wish to explore? Those along the way, or the last that appears and takes you to the disappearance of the world and self-identification? There were the gradual unfolding experiences of lights, kundalini, energy, etc., but the last two were the ultimate transformational happenings. With the laying on of hands by Father Blyton while in the esoteric order, the Holy Order of Mans, during one nightly devotional, a great gold light, about 4 inches across, went through my body like a large lightning bolt. I was in a samadhi state after that. From that time, I saw auras, energies. After some time, that settled. Then approximately 10 years later, when sitting down to meditate, suddenly there was a vibration at the end of the spine, and a raging heat rose up the spine. The energy continued on from that time until completion in 1999. At times, it became so hot that I felt as if I might spontaneously combust. At one point, a flame pattern appeared by the heart chakra, and that lasted for approximately a month. And it was a flame pattern. You could see a absolutely outline of like flames in the heart chakra area. And then all of a sudden, an ice cold sensation filled that area. It was like somebody poured the most ice cold water you can imagine right in there. End of the flame pattern. During this time, spontaneous hand mudras and postures took place for some time. At that point, you just start automatically doing all of the hand gestures that you see the statues doing. It's not something you're trying to do. The body just does it. You start doing all these yoga moves. Again, not going to a kundalini yoga class. Your body automatically, spontaneously starts moving you into these yoga moves to connect these energy pathways in the body. Okay. At times during the process, pictures that were taken would come back with lights showing. This was not aura photos. This was regular cameras. One time there was a large gold light coming from the crown of the head, while from around the waist there appeared a fog or a mist. You could see absolute light coming here. And another one where you could see light proceeding out of the mouth. It was like a fog from the bottom half of the body. Okay? And this again was in regular camera pictures. Not aura photos, nothing like that. That's how strong that energy is, that regular cameras can pick it up. I wish I still had those photos. Unfortunately, I don't. They got lost along the way somewhere. So the picture was taken during a sunny day. This phenomena happened on many occasions, with many different cameras and different persons taking the photos. At one point, there was the belief that Tantra was needed to balance such energies. But going beyond that, I found that it was just an ideation and a concept that had in the end no more validity than that which your mind creates, sustains, and holds. If your mind believes that it is needed, then the form and emotion will create that need, but in truth, beyond it is no male or female. Therefore, it is a self-generated ideation and eventually will be moved beyond. Empathy to enlightenment and mystical union. It started first with a oneness with nature, and it progressed into a feeling of oneness of love and compassion with all humanity. But then it progresses into a feeling of the great sorrow of humanity, a wrenching of heart and mind, sorrow that's not only your own, and at times the weight is more than one can bear. Okay? And this is felt mentally, physically, that you can barely take a breath. You feel the sorrow, you feel the angst, you feel the torment of the world. It's torture. When I was young, I asked to walk the path of Christ. I had no idea what I was asking at the time. And this sorrow, this pain of the humanity is so overwhelming. You can hardly take the next breath. You can hardly just... At that point, it says, from there you go into the dark night of the soul, where there is a going into the land of the dead, so to speak, because you pray for that pain to be taken away. And when you go from that pain, you go into a feeling of like this death, not a liberating death, I mean a death. There's nothing but endless unfeeling, like a walking zombie. In this you pray for death, for death would be easier to endure than this walking hell. But then once again it transforms, and the great awakening begins. That's the start of awakening. All the rest of this you have to go through before you even begin to get to a point where you can start an awakening process. Like I said, at some point it is so bad you are literally praying for death because you do not think you can take another second of this agony and this hell of seeing this suffering. And then when that feeling of death like a zombie comes, you're praying for the resurrection, because that's even worse than the pain. That feeling of that separation is worse than the pain and agony and the sorrow of humanity. So things progress until you can slow the mind. Things progress until you can slow the mind and stay within the moment. Then the last barriers and conditionings fall. First you move into knowing, not from the intellect, but like a light switch. Now this is more like those aha moments, those cognitions, it's not liberation, but these are cognitions which begin to unlock some of these things so they can be experienced directly. All of a sudden, you know that you are not the body. You're not the mind. You're not emotions. And like a miracle of freedom is there. So first you have this ideation, this concept, this starting of this awakening. But that's not liberation yet. You see it way far before you get to any possibility of liberation. But these things you find, oh, I'm not the body, I'm not the mind, I'm not the emotions. It's very clearly seen, but it's not yet liberating. Okay? All of the pain of life and other lives is immediately at an end, and you enter into that pristine clarity that you are purity itself at the core. And from there, body awareness starts to go. It becomes difficult to even walk at times, but one more barrier is there. It had come to the point of the wall, when all is surrendered. Then all at once there's a great fear that rises up, knowing that this is the time for the ultimate sacrifice. For truth, on the precipice of the great unknown and unknowable, intuitively knowing that something would not survive the oncoming experience. In faith, there is a transcending, a lapse into that place which is beyond mind and transient realm. There's no awareness of this world, or seeing with the eyes, or hearing with the ears. The you ceases to be. And what is beyond the transient is rested in. No longer a within or a without, simply source or essence at the core of being remains. How long within that eternal moment? I know not, for I was alone. Whether a second or days, there is no remembrance. And when coming back to body and senses, the great change has been wrought. It would never be the same world as before. That self that was disappeared. And simply the great impersonal remained and remains to this day. There's a total shift of consciousness. the person you were dies. Never was, never existed. There's a total shift of consciousness. So conceptualization to actualization. When simplifying life and existence and slowing into the moment, allowing every action to become a meditative happening, that affected and moved me into the no-mind state, and then creative emerged. Just like ritual connects the inner and outer realities, being that mine took the form of spiritual writings, it moved me closer to center. First the words emerged as concepts, and then they became actualized as truth and knowing by direct experience. So this goes into, again, my time during the esoteric order and the photographs and all the strange phenomena that took place. Some of the phenomena, there was so much phenomena I couldn't write it in a couple of books. I did not try to awaken kundalini. It happened with Shaktipat, with a blessing. All that I was expecting was a normal evening at prayers with the usual blessing, okay? What I got was, again, that pure gold light, 4 to 5 inches across, that was like a lightning bolt that went through the top of my head and through the whole body, in effect nailing me in place. I could not move. This wasn't some psychological wish. I wasn't interested in pursuing or developing psychic skills or looking to expand consciousness. I was simply a committed person searching for God through a Christian modality. From that moment, auras were seen, a purple glow around the cross on the altar, and a gold glow around the cross on the wall were clearly seen. I had never in my life seen auras before, nor did I have any wish to. From here, I was in a samadhi state for 3 days also. Not something looked for, and I had no idea what it was at the time. I now know the samadhi state, but at that time it was so overwhelming. But Father Blayton knew exactly what had happened when it happened. So his energy was so intense that a few TVs blew out when he walked by them. That's how intense his energy was, okay? During the most intense period, it was common for lights to be blown out one by one as I passed by, especially street lights for some reason. There was also a lot of other phenomena that appeared, like lights on regular photos. Everyone else's photos on the same roll were fine. Only mine showed in every frame some unmistakable light coming from the head, and from the waist down, a mist was seen. Also, another photo showed a curled up snake in the mist by one shoulder, and the other one had something else, but I don't recall what it was. Unfortunately, these photographs have gotten lost along the way. But so, point is, this had nothing to do with the magical mental thought system. Cameras don't think magical thoughts. There has been a distinct voice that was heard loud next to the ear that went, "Ha!" Loud. Also have heard internally a voice, but it felt to be some sort of like a psychic radio type of happening, random waves, which I didn't really pay attention to. But I was hospitalized to make sure it wasn't temporal lobe epilepsy. After being fully monitored for 2 weeks, 24 hours a day, it was established that this was not the case. So, medicos nonplussed. Not having anyone to guide me, I turned to the medical profession. Big mistake. They diagnosed, re-diagnosed, tested me for temporal lobe epilepsy. After 2 weeks of monitoring, it was established that was definitely not what was going on. After the testing, it was seen that I remained much of the time in a sort of light trance type state, samadhi, if you will. This was recorded by the EEGs. Okay. I was also tested quite thoroughly by the psychiatric community to rule out schizophrenia and all other diagnoses that could be contained within such phenomena. All ruled out. PET scans, CAT scans, EEGs, psychiatric evaluations, all clear. No magical thinking. But yes, it showed that I was in a, what do they call it? The alpha? I forget what brainwave, but yeah. Was in a samadhi state. Realization and resulting consciousness. When something is stated from here, it's not from what has been read or studied, but from direct cognition of a hard-won path of wisdom. It is not said in order to put somebody down, nor to tread on your belief systems and your belief structures, but to rather aid another in breaking through the structures that keep the suffering persona in play. It is an act of compassion and doesn't come out of arrogance, as some may assume at first glance. There is nothing to be arrogant about. Realization is nothing other than living within the center of our natural self. It is the pre-birthright of all life. The great news, and paradoxically, the difficulty, is that we are always liberated. As total potential, the quantum reality of mind creates and sustains the seeds and gardens of our bondage. In seeking more control, what takes place are more velvet bars, holding the mindset of a limitational birth and death self, all seeking done in order to secure its safety, is again another hindrance and a jail. It is only when we stop searching the externalized powers of God's heavens, etc., that the confronting of the conditioned self may take place, and the knots of illusion may be cut once and for all. There are 2 ways in. One is total expansion of heart until self consumes the world and its own identity, and simply love remains. Or 2, that path of negating what is not the eternal unchanging is, taking apart what self is not until only that divine and unchanging source is imploded into. Then one enters into the pregnant void that is empty in nature and yet contains the whole of the universe and its fragrance. In either case, the me image as a singular, need to be protected fallacy is over. And this is what people don't understand. They want to say, oh, kundalini is just an experience. No. Kundalini puts in the face all of those things that need to be seen, to break through. It shows you are not the body. It puts into place all of those things. And when you are done, you will know the mind inside and out. Kundalini takes you through the 7 levels and layers of consciousness. All of these things being put in your face so that you have to confront it. And this point of negation takes place. Neti, not this, not this, not this. So if you think that kundalini is just a little experience of feeling something and that's it, you are so mistaken. Okay? Kundalini is that motion of God moving. Okay? Read the Chandipat. Kundalini is Kali. It is fighting all of those demons, which the greatest one is ego, to break through it. If you understood Kali, you understand that, then you'll understand Kundalini. Okay? Let's continue forward. Before realization, there was life which had the flavor of seeking and mostly just existing, attempting to snatch moments of pleasure, seeing what needs to be fixed, etc., mistaking personal powers and psychic realm experience as somehow more advanced. But no matter how many cities appear, they do not translate out to the sense of peace and settled being. They can be just another support to the me, even when couched in terms of being used to aid the world, or the false humility of I'm only a tool in the hands of God mindset. The point is the keeping of the I as a separation. Okay? Those are stumbling blocks along the way. They are there to show the fallacy of what it is. Okay? Here's power. Here. Okay? You don't know until you've experienced it. Okay? Then realization happens. The world and all its beliefs about God, me, the nature of existence, the seeking, the clinging, the desires, the aversions are in one moment beyond time shattered. What a blow. The ideas surrounding and creating a limitational me story that comes and goes is over. Implosion. There is only absolute, without name, without form. Impersonal intellect, without knowledge. Relational knowledge raises not its head, for that is in the realm of duality. There is only overwhelming is. Beyond any dispute, whole, forever one, without a second. And if the world ends in a heartbeat and all of creation falls away still, this is and shall always be total simplicity, unchanging. This is which as the sustainer makes possible the ability of thought, love, the fragrance of pure experience through motion, which appears to subdivide the indivisible into existence. Okay? Self is a misnomer, for there is no personal self as such. It is all-encompassing, absolute, without question, pure, unchanging, life, the life of all life and the death of all death. And this is, which is beyond a separation of mind as thought and creation, is what is the divine essence of not two. There is a reason that it is stated not two, and they don't say one, because it's also not one. One can be subdivided. The eternal is can never truly be divided. Okay, so it's not two. It is also not one, as one is substance and divisible. As it may be seen, this is not able to be translated into divisionary speech and cognized in its fullness by mind, limited to conceptualized ideas and frameworks ingrained as points of self-experience. It blows the mind to bits. Sometimes all words fail and they fall away. The world at once is totally changed, and at the same time nothing has changed. There's a body that speaks, and yet no point of a seeking self remains. This cannot be explained logically. Attempting to think in seeking a word or conceptualized image is most difficult. This type of interaction falls away. What comes only spontaneously in the moment and then again falls away. Sometimes it simply doesn't arise, and there is only the stillness of pure awareness that is in that moment. After realization, it takes time to come back into some semblance of what others would term a normal life, as one can no longer relate to seeking, as there's nothing now remaining to be looked for, to questioning, as there is no longer any ability to hold doubt, to desire, as there is no longer a me in place that feels a lack or need relationship. One is whole as is. Life becomes simply pure experience without complication, without fear. For there is only liberation, and indeed has always been. Unfortunately, for the dual mind, even suffering is a part of liberation, a pre-birth right. Some will look and say, then who is speaking? Oh yes, the great Advaita police. That's the question. If there is no me, how can speech take place? The I that is simply the singular life force of not two. The me that remains is likened to a wisp of fragrance without solid moorings, aware of mind yet not contained by mind. It is neither one nor another. It is at once whole, the whole of creation, and yet forever separate and distinct, It is something most wonderful, and yet it is totally natural. There is simply a flow and a dance that remains, not to raj. Whether creation or destruction, the dance remains. Thank you for allowing a space for this to flow, to take place. Have we gone anywhere? Where is there to go? Be well and happy, for there is nothing to fear as life begets life. And so that's what happens on a spiritual path. If you are dedicated and you are searching and seeking, it takes much prayer, it takes much surrender, going through the dark night of the soul. And then when all implodes and falls away, one realizes they have always been free. It's how quantum works. Okay, quantum. You are free to be in bondage. Okay. Oh. And what remains is just that silence. There's always here that silence. That's what a nirvikalpa sahaj samadhi is. There are no internal thoughts any longer. It's just quiet. Quiet. Whereas most people are hearing the mind, thoughts, self-talk all day, here there's nothing. Quiet. And it's been that way since 1999. The mind has not regenerated into an ideation of a separation, of a me-ism. So I will leave this here. You know, for a long time after realization, one comes back and it's very difficult to speak. You almost have to learn again to use language, because to say I is very foreign at that point. After realization usually is saying one, this one, or because there is no feeling of being an I. That person died. That person never existed. Okay? That was a crazy story. What was that? There's no relationship to that any longer. Okay? It's like, that's why Buddha says, I'm awakened. I woke up from the dream. That was a dream. It doesn't exist. Okay? So, again, after realization, you just sit. You're in silence. Everything is like a new world. When you sit, you is so open that a tree leaf flutters and you feel it in your heart, and it's blissful. It's so blissful. Sat Chit Anand. That truth and that bliss. Okay? It's what's there. So if you are going to be a guru, you have to come back and, again, not stay open to that wonder, because you have to be able to function and speak with people. It's so much easier just to stay in that space just blown out in that silence and just that bliss overwhelming, but it's not helping people to stay there or to keep speaking in Advaita. Okay? One has to come back and speak in the words of duality to reach those that are in the dualistic mind. It doesn't help you if I am speaking from Advaita, from the consciousness of that singular is. Okay? Because we're here to try to move people forward out of the suffering self. Okay. So I am going to leave this here. And hopefully that helps people to understand what the path takes, what the journey is. Okay? Now, I went through very quickly, but there were 5 years in India, okay? And this was taken over, like I said, from a young age, from even before high school. I didn't spend my time in parties, going out and doing the things that most people do, okay? I didn't have a relationship where I'm living with somebody for years. Okay? This is a very solitary search. There is no time for, oh honey, oh baby. You are a hermit, you are a monk, you are, celibate, you are 100% in the path of seeking during that point. There is no time. Okay? To be dating and going out and drinking and partying and so I just wanted to leave this here. Some things that you come to cognize again too, and so much, I think of so much of Hinduism is mistaken. When you're there, you take the external practices and that becomes internalized, and then you understand and you see that the different gods, goddesses are different energies. They're different, how do I want to put it, different types of states of consciousness, different. You take things in and it becomes very internalized rather than this external thing that people want to make it out to be. Externalized things. Until you come to the inner knowing, you will stay in this dualistic realm. Externalizing everything. Divisionary. Okay. So I hope this helps some people to understand what the journey is. Okay. Rather than people thinking that, oh, if you're a spiritual teacher, oh, you have to be dressed in robes, you have to do this, you have to that. If people that are doing that are still caught up in the game of it, when everything completes, everything dismantles, you don't need to play the game of spirituality. You are on holy ground wherever you are at. There is not one place more holy than another place. Okay? You wear the robes, you do that as long as you need to cling to something, as an ideation, as a concept. Okay? So leave you with that to think about. Have a great evening.